So my wife laughed when I did that yesterday morning. So should that be the signature morning move, taking a sip of coffee as we pop on board? Good morning. Happy Monday. I believe, and I didn't go back and look, but I believe that we're starting month 2 of our morning conversations, which is kind of amazing. It shows how you can do something little, and if you just stay at it, then over time, you build and build and build. So I want to talk to you about a little bit of a new concept today, creating lasting change, or just creating change. And for today, we're just going to get some basic ideas in our head. Now, there's a lot of preconceived ideas about change. A lot of people think change takes a long time. It takes forever to change something or to get over something. There's also an idea of, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That somebody who's been set in their ways for a long time, they're not going to change. You hear people say all the time, people don't change. And we have a lot of beliefs around that, and there's a lot of ways that we can show that that's true, right? I mean, there's a lot of, certainly all of us have got proof in prior relationships that people don't change, or that once people get set in their ways in a certain way, they can't change, or that change takes forever. The reality is none of that is true. People can change, and change doesn't take forever. When change actually happens, it actually happens in a heartbeat. Now, the preparation for that change could take days or months or years, but when the actual flip happens, it happens in a second. So, think of a time when you've tried to change something for a long time. Quitting smoking, losing weight. You were in a relationship that wasn't going anywhere. And then suddenly, and make it something that you tried to change forever. That you tried to change. Remember, language is important. That you tried to change and tried to change and tried to change, and you wanted to change. But then all of a sudden one day, you got up and you said, that's it. That's it. Never again. It's over. Something happened, and all of a sudden the switch was flipped. You remember a specific time where that happened in your life? A relationship is a great example. Or you quit smoking, and you really quit. At that moment, when you think about it, what really happened is you hit threshold. Something happened that you got enough leverage that suddenly you weren't going to take it anymore and you decided to change. So first I want you to get the concept of change can happen in a heartbeat. Secondly, that anybody can change. It's a matter of motivation. It's a matter of leverage. So how does that happen when in fact it does happen? What happens is, remember, why do we do anything? To avoid pain and gain pleasure, right? We always want to move away from pain and towards pleasure, and we'll do a lot more to avoid pain than we will to gain pleasure. When somebody changes, it's because they finally come to the realization that what's going on has been painful in the past, is painful now, and it will be painful in the future. And the last one is really the big motivating factor. And intellectually doesn't mean anything. Every person that smokes intellectually knows it's bad for them. Why don't they do anything about it? Because they don't think it's going to impact them. They don't feel that in their gut. They know that smoking kills pretty much everybody that smokes, but they don't look at it as it's going to happen to them. That's in the future. What they're focusing on is they're focusing on the pain and the discomfort of having to give up something right now and not the long-term pain. If they were to focus on the long-term pain, then all of a sudden, and they made that real, then all of a sudden change would be a must. So when somebody quits smoking, when somebody quits drinking, when somebody finally loses the weight, what's happened is there's been enough leverage that pain in the past, in the present, and big time in the future suddenly becomes real for them, and then change happens. And when it does, it's in a heartbeat. That change is absolutely in a heartbeat. So we can speed that entire process up because we can control what our focus is, and we can give ourselves the leverage. So let's talk about some examples. Who's known somebody that has never taken care of their health, and then one day they have a heart attack, and all of a sudden they are faced with the reality of what their lifestyle has done to them over time. And now they completely change and become the healthiest person in the world. They eat incredibly healthy. If they were smokers, they stopped smoking. They started exercising, and they got unbelievably healthy. Now, did that change take a long time? No, the preparation for the change took a long time. What happened is they finally got leverage. They felt enough pain in the present that they changed. And once they made that change, they never go back to being who they were before. Now they can go back to being who they want to before, but that's a choice that they make. Why would that happen, by the way? I know this is a little bit of a side thing, but when they make that change, why would they go back to who they were before? Because of their peer group. If they don't change their peer group and they make all these changes and then all of a sudden they're not focusing on the pain of the future anymore, the peer group can take them back to that lifestyle. That's why if you ever, experienced AA, one of the things they're going to talk to you about is change the people that you're spending time with, because otherwise there's no way that you can make those long-term changes. But smoking is another great example. And usually smoking, it happens for somebody else. For a lot of times when somebody quits smoking, the leverage is really a child, that they don't really focus on what could happen to them, but a child comes to them and gets them to focus on what could happen to them. You know, Daddy, you're going to die because of smoking cigarettes. Daddy, you're not going to be able to make it at my wedding. And they're willing to go through the pain, but they're not willing to put their child through the pain. And even if they don't believe that that's going to happen to them, they still aren't willing to put their kid through that type of worry. And so they'll quit smoking for their child. And for a lot of us, that's true, that we'll do more for somebody else than we will for ourselves. That's a great place to get leverage. My favorite example, the movie A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens. So Ebenezer Scrooge is a guy who is significantly wealthy, and he believes that the reason that he's significantly wealthy is because he's incredibly cheap and because he's a jerk to everybody. He's a tyrant to everybody and incredibly frugal, and that's why he's wealthy. By the way, if you really read the whole book, what Dickens tells you in that book is that Ebenezer Scrooge is also the hardest working person in the town, and he's also very, very smart. So what he subtly tells you in the book is his wealth really wasn't because he was cheap and a jerk to everybody. And in fact, that held him back. He missed out on opportunities because he was such a tyrant. And he missed out on opportunities and always came from a place of lack because he was so cheap. That's actually added in the book. But that was what he associated. And he liked who he was. He was not interested in changing at all. He liked his life. He liked who he was. He was comfortable in his own skin. He was perfectly fine. And then what happened? He got visited by 3 ghosts, and they showed him that his actions and attitude were painful in the past, they're painful in the present, and they're going to be terribly painful in the future. And in a heartbeat, he changed. So for today, on our Happy Monday, as we're moving forward, we did goals 30 days ago. I hope you're still looking at them every morning. I hope you're asking yourself morning questions if you get the chance, if you remember that. We're managing our state. We're paying attention to all that stuff. We're giving ourselves grace. We're not beating the crap out of ourselves when we don't do everything perfectly the first time. But for now, we're going to talk about change for a little bit. And I want you to just get the concept today that an old dog can learn new tricks if you get a big enough carrot and you get a big enough stick. They need to be motivated by both, and they can change. And secondly, I want you to know that change can happen in a heartbeat. Society has decided, and we go along with it, that for certain things, change has to take a long time. You'll hear people say, well, it's going to take time. Well, if you believe that, then it will take time, but it doesn't have to. Change can actually happen very quickly, but it's got to be done right. You got to have leverage. You got to have the belief that change must happen, and you got to have the belief that change must happen now. If you have that type of belief, that's when things actually change. And anything can. Anything can. So for today, as you're driving around, turning on the heat because it's freezing outside, think about a time when you wanted to change something and it took you forever, and then finally you did. You hit that threshold. Whether it was breaking a habit, whether it was losing weight, whether it was getting out of a relationship that you should have gotten out of long before you did, in fact, get out of that relationship. Think about something that you tried to change for a long time and then finally did. And thinking about what got you to that threshold, go back to that moment that all of a sudden you put out all other options and you made that decision that you were going to change for the rest of your life. Go back and give yourself credit for that strength that you had when you did that day. And then maybe even take time to write down, how did that happen? What was the leverage? And then let's talk about some things that you want to change now and how, in fact, we can do that. Have a great Monday, everybody. Everything's starting to open up. It's going to be exciting as we brave our new world. We're going to get through this. Everybody have a great day.